everybody. I'm Dane Sanders. I want to welcome you to Fast Track Coaching. This is episode, I'm not sure, 160 something, and we've been at this for quite a while. We've had photographers, luminaries, brilliant folks from all over the spectrum, and today is no exception, and I really hope you enjoy the show. For those of you who are new to Fast Track Coaching, let me get you up to speed really quick. The way it works is it's a conversation, like a coffee chat between me and someone who I think is brilliant and could offer a lot of insight to help you move your creativity and your business forward just a little bit this week. And your job is to be as active as you can. So if you're watching this live, you can watch that in the chat room. You can Twitter about it afterwards. You can engage with any of us afterwards. But the point of doing this is to engage the conversation and push things forward. And we hope that this is helpful in that direction. By the way, a quick note, the folks who underwrite this whole deal is a company called Adorama. So if you're a photographer and you need to get gear, my encouragement is for you guys to support the folks that provide this kinds of content, if indeed this is valuable to you. Well, my guest today is Jonathan Robert Willis, and if you guys, if you're in the commercial world, I suspect you know who Jonathan is, but if you're not, I think you're in for a treat, especially around the conversation about creating a unique style and look, especially from a minimalistic perspective. So without further ado, I want to invite Jonathan to the show. Welcome, Jonathan. I don't see your face right now, and I think you have to hit the camera button to pop on. And abracadabra, just like that. There you are. So, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
Your name is listed as Laura Willis, which makes me think that you are indeed married. Is that
I am,
fair?
yes.
Uh-huh.
Smoking hot.
I can relate to that dilemma. Hey, just a logistical request. The way that the camera will work when it splits for the replay is if you can stay close to center, that would be probably most helpful. And I'll try and do the same as best I can. But to introduce everyone to the show, I wanted to give you guys, just actually give you a chance, Jonathan, to just share a little bit on your journey as a photographer, and then I want to get into the topic at hand. So what got you to today, and what are you up to photographically?
Yeah, so I began my journey as a photographer probably almost 12 years ago, and when I stole my dad's Canon AE1 and learned how to process, film in my high school's darkroom. I was pretty much the only one that used it. Me and another guy who's also a photographer. Learned how to do everything totally wrong and still make a good print, which was, print quality was always like, for even at a very young age, was really important to me. I think having seen great images, I've always been aware of what a beautiful print could look like. I ended up going to school to learn more about the craft and kind of relearn how I did everything wrong. Got my start shooting film, emulating photographers like Michael Wilson, who's an amazing portrait photographer. Fell in love with photographers like Henry Cartier-Bresson, and the work of Annie Leibovitz was always really, just kind of sticks out in my mind as a huge influence. Graduated school, got married, and got pregnant, and right away. And
Congratulations! I didn't know that you could pull it off. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, like we pulled it off in rapid succession. We have 3 kids, and I had 3 kids in the first 4.5 years of our marriage. So,
wow,
it's busy, and I was the breadwinner for all that time, and had no experience really professionally aside from little gigs that I'd pick up as a student, making portraits and whatnot, and nothing like the pressure of a hungry baby to encourage productivity and asking people to pay you to do what you do. So,
well, it's an eclectic journey. I mean, even the way you're describing it. First off, what school did you attend?
Yeah, I went to a local college here in Kentucky, Northern Kentucky University.
Nice.
And great, hidden gem of a school. They had an amazing photography department, great resources. Barry Anderson heads up the department and just does an awesome job. So
that's great. Well, so it's funny. In my I used to live in Santa Barbara, California, and that's where I got my start. I'm self-taught though, and I didn't go to a place like Brooks, which is a photo school up in that town that's kind of famous. And in my book, I actually talk about this art school, this place that I make a bit of a caricature of it, but I was always jealous of the technique that was taught in that context, but was also a little bit probably judgmental of folks who graduated from those places, not universally, but in select moments where I'd see these people who were enthusiastic after the craft, like you were describing in your high school days, and then they would go to this environment. And for this particular school, in my experience, a lot of the graduates kind of develop a little bit of a edge to them, a little bit of a well, I called it grumpy, little prima donna grumpiness, and I got in a lot of trouble for asserting that idea. But as someone who is, started self-taught and then had the awesome opportunity to learn it in a context like that, where you can kind of work out the kinks and refine the craft in a particular direction. I want to get an honest take. Like, did you find, and maybe this wasn't, a specific, art school per se, it was more of a department in the context of college. Yeah. But what was your perspective like when you were just pure enthusiast, in contrast with learning professional technique and then going kind of re-engaging the marketplace and having to play it? Was there any kind of cultural shifts that went on for you as you went through that progress?
I think I've always been really just hungry to create, and I've always been very entrepreneurial. So I don't know that my college experience, like my experience as a student, was typical of most, because I've also seen sort of what you're describing at some of the art schools, and am sort of chuckling because I can totally relate. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I kind of approached it as, I looked at the people who were kind of lazy in my school and saw them like, well, I'm kind of glad they're here because they're going to be working at the Walgreens 1 hour photo developing,
That is so right.
A discount, right? And
yeah.
And I don't know. I guess it kind of just came easy for me. I wouldn't. My experience was great. I wish I was pushed a little further, and I wish that I had a few more connections out of school. I think that's what a school like Brooks can offer that maybe a smaller community school couldn't. And I'm not even sure I answered your question at this point. But
no, it was more a curiosity thing, because it just seems like you have looking at your work and seeing the position you're in right now. You're in contrast to someone like, again, it's a ridiculous stereotype, my assertion in the book. But I love that you're breaking the stereotype and you're like, okay, yeah, I love the craft. I cared enough about it to make an investment in myself. But I went in with my eyes wide open around, this is still, if I'm going to do it professionally, it's a business. And I'm going to be entrepreneurial in my pursuit of that enterprise, which is, I think, really smart. And yet, in the middle of it, you seem to, especially looking at your work, you seem to have done an amazing job of defining a style. And we're going to talk a lot about that kind of minimalistic commitment that you have, and how that plays out, especially in environmental portraiture. And it's funny because, I don't think you would classify yourself as a portrait artist per se. At least that's not how I've heard you describe it. By the way, is that my phone ringing?
No, it's mine home.
It's
my wife. She always calls when these things happen.
I don't mind. It's great. Put her on the line.
Okay, yeah, sorry, go on.
Oh, well, no problem. So, anyways, if she calls again and you need a 911, feel free to pause. My dog comes in the room all the time during these interviews, and I don't mind pausing for her, so no problem. But what was my question? I totally lost track of what I was saying.
Had to do with sort of, I think. Well, let me just try to answer what I think you were talking about. It's just how I've sort of presented myself as an artist. I've always seen myself as an artist first, and anything that I've put out there, even from a marketing standpoint, early on, and I think early on I knew that there was a difference between technicians and artists.
No doubt.
Technicians are hired to make an image that they're told to make. An artist, I felt, were hired to make an image that they saw and they knew how to make. And so anything that goes out there with my name on it is very much got my fingerprints all over it. And the journey of finding that voice, like, has taken years to the point where I feel like in the last 2 to 3 years I've really clarified what it is that I have to offer, the photography community in terms of my voice. But that may have answered the question we were sort of driving at.
Well, it did, and thank you for jogging my memory. But that's the tension that I'm struck by is in looking at your work, you have a clear artistic bent, you have vision of what you want to accomplish, and you're employing the techniques to do that. And yet, you're a commercial shooter, editorial shooter. You have paid clients who hire you for a specific kind of thing. But you found this sweet spot where you get, it seems like, at least from your portfolio, and we'll get to that in a second, it seems like you found this really great tension point between being able to do what you want to do artistically, but actually in a marketplace that's going to pay you. Like, not everyone gets to have Annie Leibovitz, like be in Annie Leibovitz's position, where she gets to, go and take pictures of all these folks. That you get to take these kinds of pictures of everyday people, but put your stylized picture on it. At least that's what I make up when I look at your work. It's pretty fantastic.
Well, thank you. I'm getting a little bit of a glitch on the screen. Is it frozen on your end?
It's not frozen. Am I frozen to you?
Or are we caught up?
I think we're caught up now.
Okay, sweet.
It didn't break on my end, so we should be okay.
Okay, that's good. So, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's always been very, very intentional, and sort of getting there. I feel like, as I think about my work and my craft, it's almost as though I'm very interested in the social aspects of making a photograph, or just the relational dynamics that are required to make an image that's some of the stuff that I do. And the photograph ends up almost being the byproduct of that, that journey of psychologically speaking.
Mm-hmm. But that combination of kind of entrepreneurial
but I also do apply a lot of specific technique to the way I.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. It's again. I think you're right. Let's do this. Let's actually pause on my musings on entrepreneurialism and artistry. I want to look at your work, and I want to hear you talk about it a little bit. So, I went ahead and pulled your website up on my screen here, and I'm going to pull it up, and I want you to talk to us a little bit about what your intentions were with an image like this, and kind of what your thinking was in creating this image. And if you're at home and you're watching this and the image is too blurry and you want to check it out some other way, just go ahead and log on to jonbob.com, which is Jonathan Robert Willis's website, and you'll be able to at least see from the pixelated image what we're talking about and can track it. So go ahead and talk a little bit about what your intentions were here, because I want to especially get to this conversation around minimalism.
Yeah. So this particular image of the nun was shot. Was actually shot on location. We brought the studio to the location, and this is a lady who works a lot with injustice and people that are on death row, and just kind of does praise and does petitions for them and that sort of thing. So my goal here was really, how can we photograph her in a way that just invokes her heroic nature in a quiet sort of place. And it was really important for me to go to the place where she prays and the place where she does this work, at least in terms of the community center and the office. So we relocated the studio there, and I'm very, very much interested in what's happening in the face. And when you make simple images, everything counts. So the color of her, and this just happened to be an editorial shoot, and a lot of times when you go on an editorial shoot, there's a lot of open-ended, things in terms of what they're wearing, as much as you coach or direct people. So this worked out where she showed up, and what she had on, she was very presentable, and she looked really good. And so we worked with some other shots where they were very engaged in the eyes, because they say the eyes are the window to the soul, and we in fact, I think that was actually the image they ran, a real tight shot of her face that was lit with very with one light with very shallow depth of field. But with this moment, I just wanted to sort of get her to the place where she just feels totally at peace, and just having her close her eyes and almost just engage in the process of prayer like she does for these these people, and that was sort of like what led us here, and it all just kind of came together. You step back and you see there's like 5 lights set up, and my assistant, we're in this classroom, but it's I try to, in a shot like this, I try to let my tone and my presence there mirror that of what I'm trying to, and I think that as photographers maybe that's a default sort of process, but. So I know that like the tone of how I approached her and how I approached the shot, like everything kind of went very subtle and very quiet. So so yeah.
That's brilliant. I mean, I think, the light and the darkness, what she's up to, her lack of self-importance, their use of light to create separation, the attention, the simple, leading lines even to the cross and what she's about, and the line of the cross to the prayer, and it's fantastic. It's great work, man.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Well, okay, so there's these kinds of images, but then you also do these cool personal projects. Like, for example, one of the ones that I love on your site is this wind project that you have here. And maybe people are paying you for it, I don't know, but I think they're just awesome. Let me see here. There we go. And as I'm putting I'll just kind of jam through a couple of them for people to see.
So first of all, for me, it's almost all about personal projects. If you want, I want people to hire me, like I said earlier, because of my style. So that's not a default sort of thing.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Yes, that's exactly it. So this project came from a photo that I actually saw on Facebook that somebody had taken on New Year's Eve, where they were walking around with a blower. It was more just like a snapshot, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's a brilliant idea. So I went out and bought a power vacuum thing and some extensions for it, and we set up some lights in the studio, and I sent out a very vague request to a number of friends saying who wants to come down to have their portrait taken. All I know is that there is going to be high-powered wind. And that was really it. It was just, I bought the thing, I set up the lights, and I made a phone call, and had about 15 people show up in the first day, and we just blasted them. Just absolutely blasted them. And I love how, in terms of, like, limitations, I'm a huge believer in setting up personal projects and putting boundaries around them. And we talked earlier about my artistic pursuit starting in high school. In high school, there was this poster on the wall that said, "Creativity cannot exist without limitations," and that's kind of been core to my beliefs all along. So this was like, that we're just limiting to the face. And the other thing that I did with this one, I see myself very much as a director when I'm establishing like the shot. I do at some point sort of like let it go and let the thing happen. But with this, I let go almost even before we started taking, because when you're blasting somebody in the face with a huge force of wind, there is like you can't control it, and you sort of like let go to letting the wind control the shot. And I would do things like make adjustments, like maybe turn your shoulder and try to look over here. But really, it was about that. That was what it was about for me. It was about letting go and seeing what can happen when we just contort the face, with the source that I can barely control. So yeah.
Well, it's funny, like even like from a technical perspective, I mean, it looks like you're very consistent in your lighting. You can see the very pores. You can. This one is not as evident, but like there's a little even catch light in that split kind of sliver of an eye in there. So obviously you have some kind of key light and kind of cross lighting, and you're always in this black backdrop and it looks like there's even some rim light in it. Talk a little bit about thematically, was it important for you to be consistent, like always a black backdrop, always a similar lighting setup? Are those the kinds of limits that you mean when you say you're limiting what you're accomplishing, and then trying within that limit trying to do something? Or say a little bit more about that, because I want to, for folks at home, because folks at home are literally, they're seeing this and they're going, oh, I'm going to emulate this project, or maybe do something even better for themselves, because it's something that comes out of them. Talk to them a little bit about setting those limits concretely. What do you do?
Well, like with this one, it was just that. It was, a black background. It's limited just to the face. We didn't shoot bodies, we didn't shoot arms, we didn't add props. It was really like that's all that was all that I had to work with was the face. And the lighting was such just to sort of fit kind of my approach and my style and my aesthetic.
So good. It's so good.
Thank you. So I mean, yeah, that was in this one that was the limitation. There's another project that we can certainly talk about down the road that is really bound by a set of rules and a set of limitations, which is down the side of my website called Notebooks, which is very different from portraits. But we can get there in a little bit. But
keep talking, because I'm actually going to go there as we're talking, because
okay.
So there's definitely people in the chat room right now and you can write this to them because you're watching this live with them.
Sure.
But they're asking, what exactly lighting did you have set up for this shot or these sets of shots?
Yeah. This has like two strip lights right behind the shoulders, a couple of feet away. The key light is actually with I think it had I know it had a Westcott umbrella. It's like a pearlescent.
Yep.
I just love the way that umbrella treats the skin. The difficulty, though, in shooting an umbrella with a high-powered wind source is we've all seen funny photos.
I'm imagining
umbrellas in New York City, and high wind. We almost lost one of my pro photo lights due to the thing blowing over, but my assistant reacted fast, so we're good.
Nice.
And then there was just a large softbox filling, I think I think it would be the left side, back away. So just kind of, wrapped in light. I'm pretty sure there was also a bounce reflector underneath the chin to soften those highlights. And that umbrella light that is the key was pretty close, and almost, I mean, if you could, I think that person could have, if they just would have reached out right above, and they would have touched it,
Right.
So the light was wrapped around them pretty tight.
Was there any separation light between the subject and the backdrop?
Separate like a.
Was it? Well, you said the strip lights where they were over behind the shoulders?
Yeah,
Got it.
Kind of putting an edge on the people.
Got it. Very cool.
So
Very cool.
That's how that one. And that's actually a similar lighting recipe to that nun shot too. For those who are interested in how we shot that, except for that was probably shot with the beauty dish. But other than that, it was pretty similar.
Okay, so let's talk about this notebook projects, because these are interesting to me in that now these are more of a series, and you said you had specific rules. Did the rules did they emerge after you started shooting them and you said you named them in retrospect, or did you go in saying, no, these are the limits I'm going to set for myself for these projects?
Yeah, I think the rules and limits sort of were established probably after the second time I did this. I was traveling a lot shooting for a client and going to all these small town America, places, and there's some bigger cities in there too, but was doing really boring work and in these really interesting little Americana places, and so I was, I felt like I've got to. Every time I do a job, I want to bring something home that I feel really proud of, and so I decided that I was going to take a walk. I was going to walk for an hour. And I'd always fly in early or fly in late so I could fit my hour in. And I would force myself, because I also noticed that I wasn't just going out and shooting. And when I would look at something and go, I'm not sure I really want to push the button because I have to edit it, and I'm not crazy about the shot. And this was just throwing that out. So I forced myself to walk for at least 1 hour. I forced myself to make at least shoot 120 frames. I also limited myself to one lens. I had the 50mm lens on my camera because that was sort of the camera body that I learned on, and set out to with this belief that there are great images everywhere. So this became a discipline of learning how to see wherever I was to find a great image, learning how to shoot just for the sake of shooting. And then it also became a rule of editing. So I would shoot 120 frames, but I would only keep 12. And I would, as a discipline, delete everything else. And it wasn't that I was keeping the absolute best images, but I was keeping the 12 images that told the best story or made the best sort of layout. And it just became a practice that I did, over the course of about 2 years as I traveled around. So, and it, made me look forward to going and shooting maybe a not very interesting assignment, but knowing that I had a new sort of place to explore.
So in all these cases, it's striking to me. And I'm taking my earpiece out because I'm realizing I think I just heard the FedEx guy pull up or something. So I might have to cut up myself for a second. But it seems like your whole website is personal projects. But I mean, what's great though is like you go to Campaign Print. This is actually what was really striking me about your site was I was like, this is awesome. It's your whole site is in fact minimalistic. It reminds me a lot of Jeremy Coward's space, and the images are highly. You have a clear, committed style. Whether you have images in Haiti or Mumbai or simple portraits or your Win project or whatever it is, and then you click on the Campaign Print, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, somebody paid for all these, or like a bunch of them, and all of a sudden I see like this image in a context where, wow, this is a great stylized image. It's totally in line with what you do. I could totally see a client seeing your work and going, oh, I want that kind of thing, and then hiring you to go to do it. Is that and this is actually where we're going to turn a corner a little bit in talking to the folks at home. Is this the kind of thing that is actually viable, where someone can actually commit to a style, a focused, disciplined, limited even approach to the craft, but then build that style in such a way that they can be attractive to paying clients in your genre of choice, or is this only limited to kind of your style? Like, what do you think? If you're talking to somebody else who's just starting up, and I know you get in these conversations all the time with photographers who aspire to things that you've been doing, they're drawn to you for whatever reason. What do you tell them around this kind of creative act around personal projects, as well as actually getting paying clients?
Yeah, well, I think I tell people that if they want to have, I think, a fulfilling lifelong career, they've got to do the personal projects. And in order to get the projects that pay, I think that you really have to have a strong vision and a strong voice. I just think it's absolutely critical. I know that I'm not eligible for every job that's out there, but I do know that like when a client does have a need that fits what I do, it's kind of a perfect marriage. And what ends up happening is, instead of being told what to do, they really look to me to find out how can we best do this. Because I hear a lot of photographers that kind of play a little bit more of like the generalist game, and they just constantly complaining about art directors and this and that. It's because I think in that case the art director feels like that person is there to provide a service according to their vision, whereas when they bring me in, oftentimes it's because they like my vision and they're able to build on it, and so there's a lot more trust there. For me to really to push. So, is it viable? I think that I certainly think it is. I mean, I think there's so many photographers out there that are kind of hitting, the nail over and over and over, the same nail over and over and over, and it's working. So. So yeah,
well, there's a lot in what you're saying. I mean, philosophically, there's a lot in what you're saying, because it really does kind of address this idea of the generalist photographer, especially in the era that we're in, where you actually can be found. Whereas before, if you had a specialty, you might be lost for a long time until you happen to match into a market that made sense. But in an internet savvy world, it seems like even the distinction you made before between a well-trained tech and who might know more about lighting than any of us, or about how to light liquid on a African American, for example. Like, there's such specialties in how to light certain kinds of things, but that idea of having a style and a vision that you're committed to, that people are drawn to and hire because of that, and actually being in the trust business, like you're describing, things they can count on, maybe even beyond the photograph. Like I'm a portrait photographer and a wedding photographer, and I'm realizing that the skill set of what the client wants doesn't have everything to do with the photography at all. It has a lot to do with kind of their feel and their experience and kind of the whole package. So talk a little bit about beyond just the image making, how the rest of your personality and package shows up to the equation to build that kind of trust that would warrant the kind of clients you really want to get after.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, man. You know, I think I'm led by curiosity, first of all, and I think that being humble and curious, you know, can open a lot of doors for you and get you access to people and places and new and ideas that you probably couldn't beforehand. So I'm trying to avoid like the photograph end of this question, but so yeah, I mean, I think that just being like eternally curious and willing to learn is huge. You know, being a good listener is helpful too. Which is, you know, I hope I'm an okay listener.
No, well, again, I think this is the stuff that I being curious as a creative person, in a sense, part of me goes, duh, like I'm least curious when I'm least artistic when I'm least curious. Yet, yeah. I rarely hear conversations in the photographic industry around how to get more curious, how to be more generous with a client where you're listening to what they're interested in so that you can actually adapt your vision to what they're really wanting to accomplish and create something even more valuable than you would have if you just showed up and listened or showed up with your kind of boilerplate idea.
Yeah, well,
those are radical ideas.
Yeah, and I think that, like, you know, how that plays out into the client relationship, and I think this may be actually where having an art school background really helps. I remember sitting in art school thinking, man, these critiques are like so lame, and it's just all this, you know, babble, blah blah blah, about nothing. But I'm also been able to take like what I've learned about being able to articulate ideas and values and emotions and like expectations of an image or a project, and listen to like, okay, what are we trying to achieve on like beyond just like the arc of a campaign, more, you know, in terms of like, you know, taglines and stuff, but more like the emotion and the feel, and being able to really learn that language and be able to communicate what it is that you do well and what it is that you see in an image, I think is really, really helpful, really, really critical, and I think really important too. So.
Well, man, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. I hope that we'll have a chance to meet in person one of these days. You're definitely the kind of guy that I'd like to buy coffee with and get to know better. And I'd also love to hear more as your own career continues and have you back on, because I think what you're tapping into is the kind of thing that our listeners in particular they're just starving for, and I think our industry is starving for, is this kind of focused, tight, committed, humble, active creativity that is somehow viable in a marketplace that for some seems really stable and for others seems ridiculously treacherous. And I think you give a ton of hope for folks who are trying to do this. So again, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
If people want to track you online or follow you on Twitter or whatever, where's the best? How do they do that?
Yeah, it's sort of breaking up on my end, but you can find me at johnbob.com, JONBOB. You can also find me on Facebook if you just do a search for Jonathan Robert Willis Photographer.
Okay.
Maybe a little asterisk in there just to make it complicated. And Twitter is just Jonathan_Willis. So
great.
Yeah, and I think all those links, if you sort of dig into my website, they're in there.
Got it. Well, thanks, Jonathan. Thank you so much, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Yeah, man, this has been a pleasure. Thanks.
Hey, by the way, in case you guys are wondering, the way we met was we were introduced by Todd Henry, the author of and founder of Accidental Creative, and we probably should give the guy props here. Go over to Accidental Creative, because that guy, he's brilliant, has incredible, inspiring, creative content around how to do this work better. So we'd be remiss to not mention a good old Todd. So
that's right, man.
All right, thanks so much. Talk to you later.
All right, see you. Thank you.
See you.